The series begins by introducing Jax, the vice president of a motorcycle club called Sons of Anarchy, based in a town named Charming, California. Meanwhile, a rival gang called the Mayan sneaks into the Sons of Anarchy's gun warehouse. Two women hide inside a crate to steal some weapons and then set the warehouse on fire. At the same time, Jax is at a convenience store and hears a loud explosion. He looks into the distance and sees the warehouse burning. The next morning, Jax, along with Clay Morrow, the president of the club, and Jax's stepfather, arrive at the scene with two other members. They believe the Mayans are responsible for the theft and the fire. To keep things under control, Jax bribes the local sheriff to prevent the case from being handed over to higher authorities who deal with illegal weapons. The situation gets worse when two immigrant workers who were assembling stolen guns at the Sons of Anarchy's warehouse are found dead in the fire. Jax also bribes the police officer who discovered the bodies to keep the incident hidden. Later, when Jax returns to the club's workshop, one of the members, Chibs, informs him that the stolen M4 guns were actually ordered by the Niners, a black gang. On the other side of the story, Jax's mom, Gemma, is driving somewhere when Jax calls her. Even though she's a woman, Gemma is known to be very powerful in the club and in her family. During the phone call, Jax asks his mom to check on Wendy, his ex-wife, who is pregnant and struggling with a drug addiction. Meanwhile, Clay, the leader of the club, meets with the head of the Niners gang to ask for more time. The Niners had already paid for guns, but those guns were stolen. Clay is given 1 week to fix the problem, or the Niners will attack the Sons of Anarchy. At the warehouse, Jax finds some old belongings of his late father, John Teller, including a journal where John wrote about his vision for the motorcycle club. Back at Wendy's house, Gemma is shocked when she finds Wendy unconscious and bleeding badly. Back at the Sons of Anarchy headquarters, all the members gather to discuss how to get their stolen guns back from the Mayans. And Tig, one of the club members, says he'll get information from an insider in a Mexican gang. Juice, who is great with technology, plans to hack into a criminal database to find the home addresses of the Mayans members. For their revenge, they plan to bomb the Mayans warehouse. At that time, Opie, a former club member who knows how to make bombs, is asked to help. At first, Opie refuses because he promised his wife he would stop making bombs, but he eventually agrees since he needs money to pay off his debts. Meanwhile, Jax heads to the hospital after Gemma tells him that Wendy has been rushed there. At that moment, Dr. Tara, who used to date Jax, informs him that Wendy's baby needs to be born early, but there's only a 20% chance the baby will survive. Angry at this, Jax decides to teach a lesson to the drug dealer who sold drugs to Wendy. After some investigation, he finds out the dealer works for Darby, the leader of the Nordics, a gang of white supremacists. Jax beats up the dealer as a warning not to sell drugs to Wendy again. In the next meeting, all the Sons of Anarchy members gather to talk about their finances and the plan to get their stolen guns back from the Mayans. Opie's father, Piney, also attends the meeting. Piney is a senior member of the club and was close to Jax's late father. While Jax and the others are watching a cage fight, Jax suggests to Clay that they stop building gun warehouses and look for a more legal business to avoid conflicts with gangs and stay off the police's radar. Later, Jax visits Wendy at the hospital. Wendy expresses her regret and promises to go to rehab. She also admits that she still has drugs in her desk drawer. Without wasting any time, Jax heads to Wendy's house and finds Gemma cleaning the place. Suddenly, Gemma slaps Jax when he says he's doubtful about the baby's chances of survival. Gemma reminds him that when Jax and his brother were born, they also had heart problems, but they both made it through. She also tells him how Jax's father, John, died in an accident after being hit by a tractor, throwing him 178 feet before he passed away. Jax mentions the vision for the club that his father wrote, but Gemma doesn't seem too interested in that. After Gemma leaves, Jax finds Wendy's drugs and destroys them. Meanwhile, Gemma talks to Clay at home about the vision for the Sons of Anarchy. Gemma hopes that Clay can convince Jax to stop questioning the club's choice to do illegal business. The next day, at a bar, Clay and Jax give a gun as a way to settle things after Jax beat up Darby's man. During the meeting, Jax almost loses his temper when the leader of the Nordics insults his baby. At the hospital, Tara suggests that Gemma help Wendy recover, but Gemma doesn't take the advice well. In the past, Tara was a member of the Sons of Anarchy, but left the club to become a doctor. Later on, the Sons of Anarchy meet again to plan an attack on the Mayans, led by Marcus, to get their guns back and blow up the Mayans' warehouse. When Jax wants to invite Opie to join them, Donna, Opie's wife, refuses to let her husband return to the club. She is worried because Opie once went to jail because of the Sons of Anarchy's illegal activities. Not wanting to cause problems between Opie and Donna, Jax decides not to involve Opie and only takes the explosives he needs. At the same time, at the hospital, Tara is leading the surgery on Jax's baby. Back with Jax and his friends, they manage to get their guns back. However, Jax couldn't set up the explosives properly, so they failed to blow up the Mayans' gun warehouse. Shortly after, Jax and the others see some Mayans members entering the warehouse. And Clay, who holds a grudge against the Mayans, kills 4 members of the gang, even though Jax tried to stop him. During the chaos, Jax gets shot, but he is saved because he was wearing a bulletproof vest. After taking down the Mayans, Jax and the others check the victims, and one of them turns out to be Darby's man who was spying for the Mayans. Clay then blows up the warehouse with the bodies inside before leading the group away. At the hospital, Gemma visits Wendy and blames her for almost causing the baby's death because of her actions. A little while later, Jax meets Tara to thank her for successfully performing the surgery on his baby. After handing over the guns to the Niners, Clay gives a bonus to all the members, except for Opie, who didn't join the mission. One day, a new problem comes up when a local cop named Hale arrives at the site of the Sons of Anarchy warehouse explosion. At that time, the cop who Jax had bribed was trying to get rid of the 2 bodies found in the warehouse. Later on, Tig confesses to Clay that he was the one who killed the 2 people in the warehouse. If Tig's fingerprints are found, he could be arrested, and this could expose the illegal activities of the Sons of Anarchy. So, Tig plans to secretly destroy the bodies to keep the police from suspecting the club. When Hale finds the bodies, he wants to call in the forensics team. Clay, hearing this, quickly meets with Unser, who is Hale's boss. Unser tells Clay that Hale is not someone who can be easily controlled, especially because Hale's father is a politician. However, Unser agrees to help Clay, but only if Clay and his crew protect an illegal shipment that Unser plans to send. Meanwhile, Hale is eager to investigate the explosion at the Sons of Anarchy's gun warehouse, even though it's outside his jurisdiction. In a few months, Hale will be taking over as police chief, replacing Unser, who is retiring. At the hospital, Tara tells Jax that Wendy's condition is improving. On the other side, Opie, who is behind on his payments, plans to borrow money from his father, Piney. Unfortunately, Piney doesn't have enough money either, so he suggests that Opie work with Clay to help escort a shipment later that night. At the Sons of Anarchy headquarters, Clay comes up with a plan to distract the forensics team that's coming to investigate by killing a member of the Nordics and Lodi. However, Jax disagrees with Clay's idea, saying that solving one problem by creating another isn't right. Instead, Jax suggests a different approach the club could take. Later, Jax and some other Sons of Anarchy members visit a crematorium to ask the worker for 2 bodies in exchange for money. However, the crematorium worker refuses the money, saying he only wants Emily to spend the night with him. After they agree, Jax orders Half-Sack to dig up the graves and retrieve the bodies. The next day, the leader of the Mayans gang, Marcus, meets with Darby, the leader of the Nordics. During the meeting, Darby suggests that they work together to prepare for a possible attack from the Sons of Anarchy, which could happen at any time. Later that night, Emily goes to Jax's house and tells him that she is willing to sleep with the crematorium worker, but only if Jax spends the night with her first. Meanwhile, Tig is transporting the 2 bodies that Half-Sack dug up. On the way, Tig and his crew get stopped by a police officer on patrol. The Sons of Anarchy members try to trick the officer, and they manage to escape, successfully taking the bodies with them. At the same time, Clay and other members are escorting Unser's shipment. Back with Tig, he and his team place the 2 bodies inside and under a car to make it look like they were murder victims. On the other side, Clay delivers the shipment to Jimmy. On the way back, Jax and Chib spot someone who had hit their car earlier. Quickly, Jax and his friend follow the person into a convenience store to teach him a lesson. However, the man pulls out a gun, and a store worker ends up hitting him in the head. Later, Jax reads his father's journal again, which inspires him to think about bringing the Sons of Anarchy back to the club's original vision and mission. At the same time, Tig and Bobby are getting rid of the two bodies found by Hale before the forensic team arrives. When Jax leaves his room, Gemma finds an old photo of herself, pregnant and married to John. Clay and another woman are also in the old picture. Back with Tig, he burns the two bodies to erase any evidence of the Sons of Anarchy's involvement in the murders. At the same time, Gemma is seen burning the photo she found. One day, while all the Sons of Anarchy members are at an amusement park, they meet a businessman named Elliot, who is there with his wife, Karen, and his daughter. During this time, Jax notices two of Darby's men also at the park. That night, the Sons of Anarchy receive their illegal guns from a seller named Michael. Michael is part of a group from Ireland fighting for freedom. During the meeting, Clay tells Michael that the club's business hasn't been running smoothly since the warehouse explosion. Worried that Clay won't be able to pay for the guns, Michael threatens to find a new buyer. The next night, Elliot and Karen discover that their daughter, Tristan, has been hurt after being attacked. Meanwhile, Clay and his crew need to find a way to come up with the $200,000 needed to pay Michael for the guns. Soon after, Elliot meets with Clay and asks for his help to catch the person who hurt Tristan. At that time, Elliot promises to pay Clay whatever he wants as long as he can bring the attacker to him. In a club meeting, Clay, after accepting the job from Elliot, assigns Juice to follow Darby's men, who are suspected of being involved in the attack on Tristan. At the police station, Hale's father hears that Elliot has hired the Sons of Anarchy to catch the person who hurt Tristan. He tells the police they need to catch the attacker before the motorcycle club does, so that Elliot won't stop investing in the town. Wasting no time, two of Hale's officers are sent to the workshop to keep an eye on Darby's men and limit their movements. At the hospital, Wendy refuses to admit to Tara that it was Gemma who gave her the drugs. Meanwhile, Karen is talking to Hale, but she refuses to let him question Tristan directly because she doesn't want her daughter's case to be made public, which could put more pressure on Tristan mentally and emotionally. At the Sons of Anarchy headquarters, Jax gives Juice the job of following Hale using a small motorcycle. There, Jax and some of the club members question the amusement park workers about what happened to Tristan. A clown working at the park claims he knows nothing about the attack. Juice then reports back to the team that a Nordics member named Jody is suspected of being involved in the attack on Tristan. At the hospital, Gemma tells Clay that Darby is also there, and she even chatted with him while waiting for Clay to arrive. When Clay and the others get to the hospital, they ask Darby about Jody, who they suspect is the attacker. Darby denies it and tells them to check Jody's house if they don't believe him. Without hesitation, Clay and his crew prepare to head to Jody's house, where he lives with his mom. Meanwhile, Tig stops by the clubhouse, where he finds Juice passed out from taking too many sleeping pills. When they arrive at Jody's house, Jax pulls out his gun, but it's not loaded because Juice, who was supposed to load the bullets, had fallen asleep earlier. After taking down Jody's guards, Jax and the others burst inside, only to be shocked when they find Jody praying with a group of people. This proves Jax's accusations wrong. On the other side, Clay scolds Juice for taking too many sleeping pills, as Juice thought they were something else. After Gemma sees Jax talking to Elliot about the person who hurt Tristan, she decides to get clues from Tristan herself. With Gemma's help, Jax finds out that the attacker is a man who works as a clown at the amusement park. At that time, Jax plans to catch the attacker, and to keep Hale from following him, he secretly slashes Hale's car tire. It doesn't take long for the Sons of Anarchy to catch the attacker and bring him to Elliot. However, Elliot can't bring himself to punish the man, so he hands him over to Clay. Without hesitation, Clay takes care of the attacker. Later, Jax goes back to reading his father's journal to learn more about the original vision for the motorcycle club. Meanwhile, Juice wakes up on the side of the road without any clothes, and a local police officer stops to check on him. On another front, an ATF agent named Cone comes to Charming to meet with Hale and investigate the Sons of Anarchy for dealing illegal guns. But at that team, Cone's arrival isn't welcomed by Unser, as he thinks Cone is interfering with the local police's work. At the clubhouse, Jax realizes that Cone is there to keep an eye on the motorcycle club, especially after the explosion at the Sons of Anarchy's gun warehouse. Because of this, Jax suggests they ask Jury in Nevada to provide a temporary warehouse, even though the risk is facing the Mayans, a gang that controls northern Nevada. After getting Clay's approval, Jax and Bobby plan to head to Nevada. Meanwhile, Tara is shocked to find a red rose placed on her car as she's about to leave for work. Worried something bad might happen, she decides to carry the gun her father left her. Later, Tara takes her car to the Sons of Anarchy's garage for repairs. Since Jax has to leave, he asks Gemma to give Tara a ride home. Even though Tara has some issues with Gemma, she has no choice but to go home with Jax's mother. Meanwhile, on their way to Nevada, Jax and Bobby run into some members of the Mayans, which leads to a shootout. Jax and Bobby manage to drive the Mayans away and continue their journey to Nevada. As Gemma drives Tara home, she asks why Tara is carrying a gun. Tara explains that it's just for safety, and besides, her gun is legal and she has a permit for it. Once Jax arrives in Nevada, he calls Clay to let him know they were stopped by the Mayans. During the call, Clay shares his plan to offer Jury and his crew a chance to join the Sons of Anarchy because, sooner or later, the Mayans will target Jury's weaker group. Shortly after, Clay tells all his members to get ready to head to Indian Hills, except for Tig and Juice, who are tasked with stealing a cargo truck. On another note, a woman named Susie is seen getting hit by her boyfriend. And Jax, seeing this, steps in and teaches the boyfriend a lesson before taking Susie away. What Jax doesn't know is that Cone has been secretly following him and his crew the entire time. When Jax arrives at the Devil's Tribe headquarters, he is greeted by Jury, the leader of the gang. Jury explains that his bar is often threatened by the Mayans gang. If he doesn't pay them, the Mayans will destroy his business. But if he accepts the Mayans as protectors, it would mean disrespecting the Sons of Anarchy. There, Jax tells Jury that he's there to ask for a temporary place to assemble AK-47 guns for the club. He also informs Jury that Clay is on his way to Nevada to propose merging the Devil's Tribe with the Sons of Anarchy. Jury seems doubtful about Clay's idea. Later, while waiting for the rest of the Sons of Anarchy members to arrive, Jax expresses his disagreement with Clay's plan to merge the two groups. Bobby thinks that Jax has started to oppose Clay ever since Jax's son was born. However, Jax's thoughts are actually inspired by his late father's journal. Soon after, Clay and the Sons of Anarchy arrive at the Devil's Tribe headquarters. It's revealed that Jury and Jax's father, John, were friends and served together in the same platoon during the Vietnam War. During the meeting, Clay once again explains his goal to merge the two groups. He tells Jury that once they officially join, Jury and his members will wear the Sons of Anarchy vests for the Nevada branch. At that time, Clay gives the Devil's Tribe members time to discuss the merger, while Tig and Juice go off to steal a cargo truck. During the mission, Tig gets bitten by a dog, which makes him upset. At her house, Gemma checks her collection of guns, planning to give one to Tara. Meanwhile, Cone continues watching the situation at the Devil's Tribe headquarters, where Jury and most of his members are celebrating their merger with a big party. During the party, Half-Sack seems to get close to a woman named Cherry, but Clay quickly steps in to make sure Half-Sack doesn't do anything he might regret. At the same time, Tig and Juice arrive in Nevada, bringing weapons in the stolen cargo truck. The next morning, Jax takes a walk around Nevada and notices a sign about anarchism, which reminds him of his father's journal. On the other side, Gemma drops off Tara's car at her house and warns her to stay away from Jax. Before leaving, Gemma gives Tara an unregistered gun. In Nevada, Jax calls Clay to warn him that the Mayans are on their way to Jury's headquarters. Soon after, a shootout breaks out between the Sons of Anarchy and the Mayans. Although Jury gets shot, the Sons of Anarchy manage to push the Mayans back. On the other hand, Cone, still spying, witnesses the fight between the two gangs. After the shootout, Jax returns Susie to her boyfriend and heads back to Charming to check on his son, who is still in the hospital. Tara is happy to see Jax again, but she is shocked when she receives a mysterious photo showing Jax and Susie together. In a prison, a fight breaks out between inmates, and a man named Chucky nearly dies, but he is saved by Otto, a member of the Sons of Anarchy. It turns out Chucky is scheduled to be released from prison the next day. Back in Charming, Jax receives an old baby crib as a gift from Opie. Knowing that Opie is struggling financially, Jax gives some money to Donna. Jax also invites them to a charity event in Charming, organized by Gemma. Meanwhile, a woman named April asks Gemma if she can invite her ex-husband to Gemma's charity event because their son's band will be performing. However, Gemma can't promise anything because she needs to ask Clay for permission. Later, Jax and Clay visit Otto in prison to talk about Chucky, who is being hunted by a Chinese gang. They plan to pick up Chucky before the gang can harm him. At the clubhouse, Gemma talks to Clay about April's request. During their conversation, it's revealed that April's ex-husband, Kyle, was a former member of the Sons of Anarchy who caused Otto to be sent to prison years ago. That's why Clay kicked Kyle out of the club. In a meeting, it's revealed that Chucky stole $400,000 from the Chinese gang led by Henry Lin. Clay and the others plan to help Chucky retrieve the money, which is hidden in Henry's restaurant. When Clay asks if Kyle should be allowed to come to the charity event, most of the Sons of Anarchy members disagree, except for Opie. There, Opie argues that Kyle has already lost both the club and his family, so they should at least give him some support. After being released from prison, the Sons of Anarchy immediately pick up Chucky. They head to the charity event, where Kyle shows up arrogantly, with his girlfriend dressed like Elvis Presley. At the event, Bobby entertains the kids, while Jax approaches Kyle and warns him to stay away from the Sons of Anarchy members. Kyle, trying to prove he's still useful, brags about his stolen goods business and asks for a second chance to rejoin the club. Jax, getting angry, struggles to keep his cool. At the hospital, Tara is shocked when Cone admits that he was the one who sent the red rose and inappropriate photos. It turns out that Cone used to be close to Tara when they were in Chicago, but after their relationship ended, Cone became bitter and started stalking her. And Tara, fed up with his harassment, threatens to report Cone to the police if he doesn't stop bothering her. Meanwhile, Jax and Opie are relaxing when they notice Kyle still has his Sons of Anarchy tattoo on his back. The tattoo should have been removed after Kyle was kicked out of the club. Opie decides to teach Kyle a lesson by beating up his former friend. At the same time, Jax tries to explain to Donna why Opie is doing what he's doing. He tells her that Opie feels left out, especially after the club abandoned him during the mission where he was supposed to blow up the truck. After the fight between Opie and Kyle, Jax invites Kyle to the clubhouse so he can explain to Clay about the stolen goods Kyle had been dealing with. When Clay realizes that the Chinese gang is watching the Sons of Anarchy, he decides they need to grab the money Chucky hid before the Chinese gang makes their move. During the event, Gemma notices Tara looking scared when she sees Cone. After talking to a sheriff who's with her, Gemma learns that Cone is an ATF agent from Chicago. She quickly tells Jax about this. Later, the Sons of Anarchy team takes Chucky to the Chinese restaurant where he hid the money. However, when they find the cash, it turns out to be fake. Clay then decides to hand over the fake money and demands $60,000 in real money as a ransom, including handing Chucky over to Henry, the Chinese gang leader. Back at the clubhouse, Kyle is brought to the garage, not for business, but for punishment. His Sons of Anarchy tattoo on his back has to be burned off as a consequence for betraying the club. Afterward, Kyle is taken to the hospital for treatment. One day, the Sons of Anarchy deliver weapons to a rebel group led by their old acquaintance, Nate. After testing the guns, the rebels pay for them right away. Soon after, a truck arrives at the club's headquarters with additional weapons ordered by the Niners. Meanwhile, Cherry unexpectedly shows up at the Sons of Anarchy's clubhouse. It turns out that Clay has a past relationship with Cherry. Not wanting to get caught, Clay asks her to leave. From inside the room, Gemma sees the interaction between Clay and Cherry, which makes her cry, especially after Half-Sack reveals to her that Clay has been unfaithful. At the same time, Nate's rebel group attacks a prison transport vehicle to free one of their comrades. During the attack, 2 sheriff deputies are killed. Back at the clubhouse, Clay and his crew discuss how to raise extra money so they can bribe their gun supplier to stop selling weapons to other buyers. A little while later, ATF agent Stahl arrests Clay after finding Nate's phone at the scene of the prison attack. It turns out Nate had made his last call to Clay, which led to the arrest. After the incident, the Sons of Anarchy must figure out how to hide their weapons and protect Piney, a close friend of Nate, who is at risk of being arrested by the police. Jax also needs to come up with a plan to deliver the guns to the Niners, as the FBI is constantly watching the Sons of Anarchy's headquarters. At the police station, Clay denies being involved in any of Nate's activities, including illegal gun sales. Meanwhile, Jax asks Sheriff Trammell for help in investigating Clay's arrest. Trammell initially refuses, but because of his past involvement with the Sons of Anarchy, he eventually agrees to assist Jax. On the other side, Cone introduces himself to Stahl, who is unaware of Cone's secret operation. There, Cone shares evidence about the ongoing war between the Sons of Anarchy and the Mayans, along with proof of the Sons of Anarchy's involvement in illegal gun trading. On the other hand, Gemma, who had just been shopping at a convenience store, suddenly hits Cherry in the face with a skateboard. With the threat of an FBI raid, the Sons of Anarchy need to figure out how to hide their weapons from the workshop. While Jax is reading his father's journal on the roof, he suddenly comes up with an idea to hide the guns in a waste truck so they can escape the FBI's watchful eye. Meanwhile, Clay is still at the police station and is shocked to see Gemma arrested for attacking Cherry. Gemma angrily confronts Clay about his affair, causing quite a scene at the station. At the same time, the ATF team searches the Sons of Anarchy's clubhouse, but finds nothing. Jax and the other club members remain calm, because they know their weapons are safely hidden. On the other side, Tara heads to the clubhouse after Cone tells her to come and see what's happening to Jax, who is now handcuffed by the police. Since Cone couldn't find any evidence of Jax's club being involved in gun trading, he gets frustrated and angrily searches through Jax's room. Later that night, Jax meets with Nate and his group to sell the weapons, even though Nate offers a low price for them. At the police station, Stahl is still not satisfied with her investigation of the Sons of Anarchy. She suspects the club might be getting weapons from the IRA, the Irish Republican Army, and plans to dig deeper into the matter with the Department of Defense. Meanwhile, Clay is released because the police don't have enough evidence to keep him locked up. While in the cell, Clay and Gemma talk and eventually make up. At the hospital, Cherry, who is being treated, is visited by Half-Sack. It turns out Cherry came to see Half-Sack, the man she loves. Back at the clubhouse, the Sons of Anarchy gather after Clay's release, and Clay tells everyone that they escaped trouble thanks to Jax's smart idea. The next day, Jax hides the guns in sandbags and delivers them to Nate. Soon after, Piney joins in on the deal, as Nate is his old friend. Unexpectedly, Jax hides explosives in the sandbags. After Nate drives away, Jax presses a detonator, blowing up Nate's car and killing the rebel leader. Later, Jax meets with Trammell to reward him for the information that helped free Clay from jail. Jax also admits that he punished Nate for killing Trammell's colleague. The next morning, as Gemma is picked up by Clay in front of the police station, Cherry approaches Gemma and explains that she came to the Sons of Anarchy's clubhouse to see Half-Sack. Meanwhile, Jax picks up Tara and drives her home, unaware that Cone is following them. In the meantime, construction workers are shocked when they discover human bones at the building site. At home, Tara finally tells Jax about Cone spying on the Sons of Anarchy and constantly following her. Angry at this, Jax confronts Cone, who is outside Tara's house, and warns him to stay away from her. Afterward, Jax informs Hale and asks him to get Cone out of Charming because Cone has been disrupting Tara's life. On another note, Half-Sack, who often acts silly, turns out to be talented in boxing. Because of this, the other Sons of Anarchy members plan to enter Half-Sack into a boxing match with a big prize. Tig even offers to train Half-Sack until the day of the match. During Half-Sack's training, Jax informs Clay that the police are working on identifying the human bones found at the construction site. Hearing this, Clay and Tig seem surprised, as if they are hiding something. After checking out the site from a distance, Clay admits to his members that the bones belong to 3 Mayans members he killed years ago. Clay and the others plan to remove the victim's teeth, so the police can't get any DNA evidence. While Half-Sack is training, Bobby brings Cherry to the clubhouse to watch the boxing practice. Meanwhile, Tig tells Half-Sack to avoid alcohol and drugs to keep his strength up for the match. On another front, Hale learns about Cone stalking Tara. Hale promises Tara that he will get Cone out of Charming, especially since Cone is conducting his investigation without permission from his superiors. At the Sons of Anarchy clubhouse, Lowell, the club's mechanic, asks Clay if he can bring his son to work with him. Clay has no problem with it and agrees. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Tig distracts a doctor to get his bite wound checked, allowing Jax to sneak in and steal an access card to the morgue where the Mayans members' bones are being kept. At the same time, Cone sneaks into Jax's house and does something disgusting by urinating in Jax's son's room. At the hospital, Clay, Tig, and Jax enter the morgue and discover that one of the bones has been identified as Lowell Harlan Sr., the father of Lowell, the mechanic at the Sons of Anarchy's workshop. Shocked, Jax demands an explanation, and Clay admits that he killed Lowell's father during a gang fight. After hearing the truth about his father's death from Clay, Lowell struggles to believe it, as he always thought his father had abandoned him when he was 15. Clay explains that the other two sets of bones belong to Mayans members who killed Lowell's father. On the roof of the workshop, Jax continues reading his father's journal, which talks about how many truths are hidden within the Sons of Anarchy. Later, Lowell is called in by Hale and Stahl for questioning about the discovery of his father's remains and any connections to the Mayans. During the interrogation, Stahl hints that the Sons of Anarchy, enemies of the Mayans, might be responsible for the murder of Lowell's father. She and Hale also ask about the Sons of Anarchy, which makes Lowell uncomfortable. Thankfully, Unser arrives and tells Lowell he can go home. At home, Jax suspects Cone of trashing his son's room, knowing that Cone is upset about Jax being close to Tara. After learning that Cone is getting his hair cut at Floyd's barbershop, Jax rushes over to confront him. During the altercation, Jax gets stabbed in the leg by Cone. When taken to the police station, it's revealed that Cone has had trouble with many cases in Chicago. At that time, Stahl decides she can't hold Jax since his actions were in self-defense, as confirmed by Floyd's testimony. During a conversation with Stahl, Jax admits that Tara has been his girlfriend since high school. Sometime later, the boxing match begins, and in his first fight, Halfsack easily knocks out his opponent. Meanwhile, Jax is out on the road and sees Cone being taken out of Charming. At the same time, Clay goes to Lowell's apartment, where Lowell is still grieving over his father's death and hurting himself by using drugs. Clay has been looking after Lowell since he was 16 years old and sees him as a son. Upset by Lowell's behavior, Clay reveals the truth. Lowell's father was a bad person who treated both Lowell and his family poorly. Clay had to kill Lowell's father because he had become a drug addict and a traitor. In his frustration, Clay pulls out his pistol and points it at Lowell. Back at the boxing arena, Halfsack is pumped up and confident he can win his final match. The crowd is betting on him, but Chibbs tells Halfsack to throw the fight so the club can make more money. With the bets they placed, if Halfsack wins, the Sons of Anarchy will only take home $15,000, but if he loses, they will take home 10 times that amount. In the stands, Clay says he will allow Cherry to marry Halfsack if Halfsack brings home a lot of money for the club. Excited, Cherry hugs Clay, but Halfsack sees this and misunderstands the situation. Angry, Halfsack knocks out his opponent. After the boxing match ends, Clay puts a bruised and beaten Lowell into his car. Despite being upset, Clay doesn't actually intend to kill Lowell. Meanwhile, Jax meets with Tara to tell her that Cone has left Charming. Jax then wonders aloud if Tara came back to Charming so he could deal with Cone, or if she still hopes that he will take her back. At some point, Darby receives an anonymous letter containing evidence of Clay's involvement with Michael. On the other hand, the Sons of Anarchy need to figure out how to come up with the $200,000 they still owe Michael for the weapons. They decide to ask Otto's wife, who runs an online prostitution business, for a loan. During the meeting, Jax shares the good news that his son will soon be released from the hospital. Soon after, Marcus arrives with his son, Esai, to meet Darby. In the meeting, Darby suggests teaming up to take over the gun-selling business that the Sons of Anarchy are running. Darby also proposes that they kill Clay and wipe out the entire Sons of Anarchy crew. After Darby leaves, Marcus secretly orders Esai to kill both Clay and Darby so the Mayans can take full control of the gun trade in Charming. Meanwhile, Gemma meets with Otto's wife and persuades her to lend money to the Sons of Anarchy. Thanks to Gemma's efforts, she secures a loan of $55,000 with a 5% interest rate. At the same time, Jax and his crew are out riding when they come across a crashed fuel truck belonging to Oswald's company. After rescuing the driver, Jax finds a package of drugs, which he suspects is linked to Darby, who has been trying to set up a drug factory in Charming. Back at the clubhouse, Clay and the others are brainstorming ways to come up with extra money in just 6 hours to cover the remaining payment for the guns they owe Michael. Half-Sack feels the pressure and tries to think of a quick way to help gather the money. On the other hand, Jax and Opie go to the hospital to question the truck driver about where he got the drugs. The driver reveals that the Nordics gang took the fuel truck as payment for his debt. Hearing this, Jax and Opie rush to find the truck, now in Darby's crew's hands. They chase after the fuel truck and eventually manage to take it back. At the same time, Half-Sack decides to steal an ambulance to earn extra money, hoping this will prove he's ready to be a core member of the Sons of Anarchy. Soon after, Jack sells the fuel he recovered for $15,000 to Unser, explaining that Unser can later sell it to some distributors. Back at the clubhouse, the other members laugh at Half-Sack for stealing an ambulance. Shortly after, Jax arrives with the remaining money the club needs to pay the IRA. Later, Jax goes back to reading his father's journal on the room and comes across a passage that makes him wonder if he can truly fulfill John's vision for running the Sons of Anarchy according to its original mission. Meanwhile, Clay and Tig head out with the $200,000 to pay Michael. When they arrive at a bar, they don't meet Michael, but instead his cousin, Cam Hayes. Cam tells them that Michael was killed by Commissioner Hefner because Michael asked for triple the usual bribe. After showing some photos as proof, Clay believes him and hands the money over to Cam. At the hospital, Jax finally gets to hold his baby, who is steadily getting better. The next day, members of the Mayans gang attack Clay at a bar and Darby at his home at the same time. Both survive the attacks, though Cam is wounded with a gunshot to his leg. Fortunately, Tig manages to shoot one of the attackers, killing him, which makes Clay realize the Mayans are trying to start a war with the Sons of Anarchy. After hearing about the attacks, Jax and the other members quickly head to the scene. The stolen ambulance Half-Sack took finally comes in handy to transport Cam. Since Cam is a fugitive, they can't take him to the hospital, so the Sons of Anarchy members have to remove the bullet from his leg themselves. At this point, Clay wants to strike back against the Mayans, but Jax disagrees, saying the club isn't ready for a war. He argues that they don't have enough money or weapons, especially since they're now facing two enemies at once. This difference in opinion leads to a heated argument between Jax and Clay. Clay then instructs his members to call all the chapter leaders and vice presidents of the Sons of Anarchy from different states for a meeting in Charming the next day. Soon after, Jax goes to Tara's house to ask for medical supplies for Cam, who is injured. Just after Jax leaves, Cone suddenly appears inside Tara's house and grabs her. At that moment, the ATF agent demands that Tara sleep with him. Pretending to agree, Tara waits for the right moment and grabs Cone's gun, shooting him. Hearing the gunshot, Jax rushes back inside and finds Cone wounded. Realizing that Cone had tried to force Tara, Jax shoots Cone, killing him. Tara becomes hysterical, and Jax tries to calm her down. The next morning, Jax buries Cone's body in a hidden location. Meanwhile, Chibs continues trying to remove the bullet from Cam's leg. Not long after, Unser informs Clay that Darby was attacked the previous night, resulting in 2 deaths. And Clay, showing his wounded companion, also reveals that the Mayans attacked him as well. As Cam's condition worsens, Gemma and Tig head to Tara's house to meet up with Jax. When Jax meets his mother, he doesn't mention what happened at Tara's house the night before. At the police station, Darby is brought in for questioning about the attack, but he ends up arguing with Hale, who wants to make Darby a suspect. Unser steps in and stops the argument by punching Darby in the stomach. At the Sons of Anarchy clubhouse, after waking up, Cam asks Chibs to deal with Hefner, who is trying to block Cam's gun shipment. As Cam's gunshot wound worsens, Jax realizes he needs to take Cam to a doctor, so he rushes off to ask Tara for help. When Clay arrives at the police station, Unser advises him not to act recklessly with revenge, as war and retaliation will only harm the reputation of the town of Charming. At the same time, dozens of Sons of Anarchy members from various cities start arriving in Charming. After hearing Unser's advice, Clay decides to hold off on revenge, but only if Unser brings Marcus to the police station so Clay can negotiate with both Marcus and Darby. At the hospital, Jax checks on his baby, while Tara is still shaken from the events of the previous night. They comfort each other, especially since Jax has just killed someone for the first time. Clay then meets with Darby in his jail cell to question him. Darby denies working with the Mayans, which leads to Clay angrily beating him. Back at the Sons of Anarchy clubhouse, with Gemma's help, Tara quickly treats Cam's gunshot wound. Later, Marcus arrives at the police station to negotiate with Clay. And Clay, holding back his anger, agrees to sell part of the club's gun supply to the Mayans on the condition that no Sons of Anarchy members are harmed. If anyone from the club is hurt, he vows to take revenge on Marcus personally. During the meeting, Marcus also reveals that an ATF agent has been secretly sharing information about the Sons of Anarchy with Darby. After reaching the agreement with Marcus, Clay decides not to seek revenge against the Mayans. However, he warns that Darby might still try to strike back at Marcus. At the clubhouse, Clay discusses Cam's offer, where Cam promises $200,000 if the club takes out Hefner. Opie volunteers to be the one to do it, with Jax offering to help him. Although Clay agrees to let Opie take on the mission, he secretly assigns Bobby to carry out the actual shooting. That night, Jax, who is growing closer to Tara, stays over at her house. The next morning, Gemma tells Tara she should leave Jax, believing that they aren't a good match for each other. Meanwhile, the Sons of Anarchy team arrives at the location of their target. Bobby tells Opie to stand out front while Jax waits in the car. When Hefner comes out, Bobby shoots him without realizing there is a witness to the murder. Elsewhere, Isai apologizes to Marcus for failing his mission. Disappointed, Marcus has no choice but to take his own son's life. That night, Jax burns Cone's body to erase any evidence. Feeling like he's failed to fulfill his father's dream, Jax almost burns his father's journal too, but eventually decides not to. Later on, Half-Sack officially becomes a core member of the Sons of Anarchy. On the other hand, Jax and Opie are busy working on their Harley motorcycles. At the police station, Stahl interrogates a porn producer named Luann about her online prostitution business. Unser is annoyed by how Stahl treats the charming police station like her own headquarters, but Stahl doesn't care. She shows evidence linking the Sons of Anarchy to gun trafficking with the IRA, led by Michael, who was killed by Hefner. Unfortunately, Hefner has also been found dead, and the Sons of Anarchy are suspected of his murder. Because of this, Stahl plans to use Luann and other women connected to the club to gather more information. Additionally, the ATF will apply the RICO Act, which allows law enforcement to target individuals or groups involved in organized crime. Hale also asks Stahl to leave Tara out of it, as Tara is an old friend of hers and is seen as innocent. On the other hand, the FBI continues to monitor the Sons of Anarchy, which forces Clay to hide the weapons at his cabin. At that time, Stahl's first target is Donna, but Donna refuses to give any information about the club or her husband. Stahl then goes to the hospital to dig into Tara's past and her connection to the Sons of Anarchy. It's revealed that Tara lost her mother when she was 9 years old, and she and her father left Charming 11 years ago to live in San Diego. Tara claims she doesn't know about Jax and the Sons of Anarchy's illegal activities, but Stahl knows that Cone, Tara's ex-boyfriend, went missing while on duty and never returned to Chicago. Meanwhile, Jax, trying to win back Tara's love, reassures her by explaining that Cone was actually a fugitive. At the supermarket, Cherry meets with Gemma and tells her that she's being chased by the ATF. Cherry reveals that she was married to a man who ran off with all her belongings. Gemma tells Cherry to leave quickly, but just then, 2 ATF agents show up and arrest Cherry. After being arrested, Cherry claims she knows nothing about the Sons of Anarchy. However, Stahl refuses to release her, as Cherry is set to be extradited to Nevada, where her ex-husband plans to press charges, threatening her with a 25-year prison sentence. With the recent developments, the Sons of Anarchy and Unser hold a meeting to figure out how to deal with the ATF, which is planning to use the RICO Act against them. They're worried that Otto, who is currently in prison, might reveal the club's secrets. To ensure their information stays safe, Jax and Opie plan to sneak into the jail so that Luann can pass a message to Otto. With so many police officers at the station, the Sons of Anarchy team plans to distract the cops while Unser helps by turning off the CCTV cameras. At the same time, Stahl meets with Otto and threatens him, saying that Luann won't be released unless Otto cooperates. Otto, who claims he's no longer involved with the Sons of Anarchy, insists that the information he has is outdated. Despite this, Stahl plans to use the information in her report to her superiors and offers Otto a shorter sentence. Hearing this, Otto agrees, but only if he's allowed to provide the information in writing. Meanwhile, Bobby and Tig cause a commotion at a bar packed with Mexican visitors, creating enough chaos to keep the police busy. With this distraction, Jax manages to sneak into the jail to meet with Luann and deliver a message, warning Otto about the ATF's plan to use the RICO Act against the Sons of Anarchy. At the same time, Cherry escapes from the police station, despite Stahl threatening to expose her. The next day, Hale receives a sketch of two suspects that look like Bobby and Opie, drawn by a witness who saw Hefner's murder. Later, Stahl returns to the prison with documents for Otto's early release. At that time, Otto gives her a written confession about a major robbery the Sons of Anarchy committed 9 years ago. The confession will be typed up and signed by Otto. Meanwhile, Clay and his team leave Charming to deliver a package to Canada. In prison, when Luann is allowed to visit Otto, she whispers that the ATF plans to use the RICO Act against the Sons of Anarchy. Otto tells her to stay calm, as he already has a plan to deal with it. On the other hand, the witness to Hefner's murder can only confirm that Bobby was one of the shooters, while Opie's involvement is still uncertain. For the safety of the Sons of Anarchy members, Cam and Cherry leave Charming with the protection of the motorcycle club. Back in prison, Stahl continues to pressure Otto to review his confession, but Otto suddenly slams her head against the table. This shows that Otto is still loyal to the Sons of Anarchy and hasn't betrayed them. While the Sons of Anarchy celebrate escaping the ATF's watch, a task force suddenly raids their clubhouse to arrest Bobby. This reveals to Clay that a witness saw Bobby during the shooting. Tig, meanwhile, accuses Opie of betraying the club because Opie wasn't at the meeting. After the club's meeting, Jax goes to Opie's empty house and finds Stahl's business card, raising more suspicions. When Jax returns to the police station, he is shocked to find that Unser is now in a jail cell, thanks to Stahl's actions. The next day, Wendy, who has completed her rehab, finally returns to Jax's home. Meanwhile, Gemma, still at the hospital with her grandson, says she will take care of the baby by herself if needed. Although Tara also wants to take care of the child, Gemma seems hesitant to give her blessing. At the clubhouse, Jax informs Clay that all of Opie's debts have been paid off by the federal government. Hearing this, Tig becomes even more convinced that Opie has betrayed the club, though Clay believes it might be an ATF trick to divide the club. On the other hand, Opie's mother, Mary, visits Gemma after receiving a call from the Department of Justice, asking her to pick up her grandson, as Opie and his family have been placed in the Witness Protection Program. With the information from Gemma, Jax now knows that Opie's debts were paid off by the ATF. Tig is still convinced that Opie is a traitor, but Jax has doubts. Jax even swears that if Opie truly betrays the club, he will be the one to kill him. At the police station, Stahl continues to pressure Opie to confess that he and Bobby planned Hefner's murder. Opie remains silent, knowing that Stahl is trying to set him up as a traitor to the club. On the other side, Hale disagrees with Stahl's plan to frame Opie, knowing that if Clay believes Opie has betrayed the club, Clay might kill him. However, Stahl doesn't care and insists on carrying out her plan. At the hospital, Tara feels jealous when she sees Jax and Wendy together, picking up their baby. Without Tara realizing, Gemma watches her from a distance. Even though Gemma used to hate Wendy, she now allows Wendy to stay at Jax's house, almost as if she is giving her blessing to Wendy, showing that she doesn't want Jax with Tara. Back at the police station, Stahl tries to manipulate Donna by showing her a sketch of her husband, suggesting his involvement in Hefner's murder. Stahl also pressures Bobby by reading a draft of a false witness confession, hoping Bobby will give up and admit to the crime. However, Bobby doesn't believe Stahl's story and calls the witness confession a complete lie. Meanwhile, Mary, who is divorced from Piney, admits to Donna that she wouldn't be surprised if Opie was involved in crime, following in Piney's footsteps. Despite this, Mary doesn't want her grandchildren to follow the same path as their grandfather. At home, Wendy is surprised that Gemma is giving her a chance to fix her relationship with Jax and raise their child together, especially since Gemma used to hate her. A little while later, Opie is finally released from the ATF's grip, though they secretly placed a listening device in his car and phone. At the clubhouse, Sons of Anarchy's lawyer, Rosen, reveals that he couldn't uncover the identity of the witness because they're protected by the prosecutor. Like Tig, Rosen suspects that Opie has betrayed the club and was released by the feds under the Witness Protection Program to gather more evidence by using hidden listening devices. Hearing this, Clay and Tig grow even more suspicious that Opie might be a traitor. Soon after, Opie returns to the Sons of Anarchy clubhouse. Before the meeting begins, all members are asked to turn in their phones to prevent wiretapping. During the meeting, Opie tries to convince everyone that the ATF is trying to set him up. Outside, Tig uses a detector on Opie's car and finds a listening device hidden inside. A bug is also discovered in Opie's phone, so Opie throws his phone into a glass of beer in front of the whole club. Afterward, Tig secretly tells Clay about the bugs, which makes them even more convinced that Opie has betrayed the club. Clay then storms into the room where Agent Stahl is and gives her a warning. He tells her that no matter what plan she has to destroy the Sons of Anarchy, they will never succeed. During the club meeting, Clay mentions that they don't have enough money to pay for Bobby's lawyer in court. With no other option, Clay plans to sell their extra weapons to the Mayans to avoid an ATF raid. The weapon handoff and deal will take place at 2 separate locations. Meanwhile, Wendy feels unsure about fixing her relationship with Jax, especially since he is now with Tara. At that time, Gemma seems to be taking advantage of this situation to hurt both Wendy and Tara. Wendy is then placed in a safe house under ATF surveillance. As for Jax and Opie, they start gathering the Sons of Anarchy's weapons to sell to the Mayans. Jax feels the club has drifted too far from its original vision and mission, especially with all the problems they've faced in recent months. In a secret meeting with the Niners, Clay reveals he doesn't actually plan to sell the weapons to the Mayans. He asks Leroy from the Niners to kill as many Mayans members as possible, while Clay plans to take out Marcus at the deal location. In return, the Niners will get the weapons for free, as Clay is only interested in the money from the deal. After making a deal with Leroy, Clay and Tig secretly plan to get rid of Opie during the Niners' attack on the Mayans. At the police station, Hale overhears a conversation between Stahl and her team, revealing that the bugs they placed in Opie's phone and car have been deactivated. Soon after, Clay and Jax deliver the weapons to Marcus, while Tig and Opie are at a different location to collect the money. At the same time, 2 federal agents watch from a distance. Suddenly, the Niners gang ambushes both locations. Opie, who is nearly trapped, is saved by Tig. Tig has a chance to kill Opie, but decides not to. During the attack, the Niners manage to steal the guns, while Jax and Clay escape the battle. Clay didn't expect the Niners to betray him. Now, the Sons of Anarchy are left broke without money or weapons. Instead of regretting his actions, Clay and Tig continue their plan to secretly kill Opie. Meanwhile, Hale discreetly passes important information to Unser in the jail cell, making sure the ATF doesn't find out. On another day, the entire Sons of Anarchy family gathers at Jax's house to welcome his baby boy. The ATF is finally pulled out of Charming after the gang war, but Hale is still angry at Stahl for leaving town without dealing with the mess she caused. At Jax's house, Tara gets upset and slaps Jax because he didn't openly show their relationship in front of Wendy. After the welcome party, Opie and his family leave Jax's house. And Donna, who was originally going to drive the sedan with her kids, switches to Opie's pickup truck because she wanted to help Gemma clean up. Tig then follows the pickup, thinking Opie is driving it. At the same time, Unser meets with Clay and tells him that Opie isn't the traitor Clay suspected him to be. Unser explains that the ATF had set up a plan to make the Sons of Anarchy turn against each other. Soon after, Clay tries to call Tig to tell him the truth, but Tig doesn't answer because he left his phone on his bike. When Donna stops at a red light, Tig shoots her in the back of the head, only to realize too late that he had shot Donna, not Opie. After hearing what happened, all the Sons of Anarchy members rush to the scene of the shooting. Opie is devastated by his wife's tragic death. The next morning, Gemma learns that Donna's death was caused by Clay's mistake. However, she still defends Clay and tries to keep the truth hidden. Meanwhile, Unser and Hale receive a report from a witness saying that the black SUV used in Donna's murder was stolen from a bar. They both suspect that the killer is someone from the Sons of Anarchy. Despite this, Unser tells Hale to let the club handle justice on their own. During the Sons of Anarchy meeting, Clay doesn't admit his mistake, and neither does Tig, who still believes that Donna was killed by the Niners. Shortly after, Piney pushes Clay to plan a revenge attack. When Clay refuses, Piney leaves the meeting. Worried that Tig might do something reckless, Jax assigns Half-Sack to keep an eye on him. At another moment, Jax goes to the hospital to reassure Tara that she is his one true love, above all the other women he has been with. Meanwhile, Gemma finds the journal of the late John, which Jax had hidden. In the journal, John wrote about his hopes and dreams for the Sons of Anarchy Motorcycle Club. On the other side, Clay and the others get information from Rosen about the location of the witness to the murder, who is under witness protection. In order to free Bobby, the Sons of Anarchy plan to kill the witness. During the meeting, Half-Sack calls Jax to inform him that Piney has intentionally entered Niners territory. At the bar, Piney is there to meet with Leroy, seeking answers about who killed Donna. Meanwhile, Clay and Tig meet with Trammell to gather information on the whereabouts of the murder witness. Trammell agrees to help, but only if Clay can provide the case number. Back at the bar, Leroy tells Piney and Jax, who has just arrived, that the Niners had nothing to do with Donna's murder. This leaves Piney and Jax wondering who the real killer is. Clay then pressures Elliot to use his connections to get the case number for Hefner's murder. At the police station, Jax learns from Hale that Opie was framed by the ATF, leading Clay to believe Opie was a traitor. This is why Donna became the unintended victim of Clay's plan. In front of Bobby, Stahl confesses that she set up Opie, which ended up causing Donna's death. There, Stahl admits this because she plans to arrest Opie on charges of premeditated murder. Meanwhile, Gemma becomes increasingly worried after Jax learns the truth about Donna's death. Her concern grows as she thinks about John's journal. When Gemma tells Clay about the journal, Clay orders her to burn it. At another moment, Jax pressures Clay to admit that he planned to kill Opie, but Clay denies it, even though his plan led to Donna's death. Jax also learns that Tig is planning to kill a 17-year-old witness. With Chib's help, Tig breaks into the witness's house and knocks out the guards. Just as Tig is about to kill the witness, Jax shows up and stops him. There, Jax tells Chibs to leave and gives the witness money, instructing them to leave California for safety. Jax then scolds Tig for going too far. At the clubhouse, Piney receives a journal from the late John, just like Jax did. In the journal, John wrote all his hopes and dreams for the Sons of Anarchy Motorcycle Club. That night, Jax sleeps near the cemetery where Donna will be buried. In the final scene of the series, on the day of Donna's funeral, all the Sons of Anarchy members from different cities gather to pay their respects. During the funeral, Jax steps away from the club members. Soon after, Piney hands John's journal to Jax, who is sitting by John's grave, telling him it's time for them to change. The series ends. The moral lesson from this series is if you're going to shoot someone, make sure it's not your buddy's wife by accident, because that's one awkward apology no one wants to make.